Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be doing a preliminary winter outlook or forecast for the years 2025-2026. And as you can see, I have a little picture of a winter scene, which probably sooner than later, than most people think, we will be seeing. In order to get a good look at what may be coming, we got to start off by looking at the ENSO outlook. So many people that are into winter forecasts or winter outlooks are probably very familiar with what this stands for. And this basically stands for an area of water that is off the western coast of Peru and Ecuador, the Pacific Ocean, all the way to Australia, Indonesia, basically East Asia. Whether or not that area of ocean is above or below average by half a degree Celsius determines if it's a La Nina or an El Nino. And in this case, if it's somewhere in between, we have a neutral, which is what, as you can see by this graphic, is most likely going to be this year. Enso neutral is most likely to the late northern hemisphere summer, with chances of La Nina conditions increasing into the fall and winter of 2025-2026, but remain comparable to an Enso neutral. So because this is a preliminary winter outlook, we are going to assume that right now we are looking at a ENSO neutral. Now, obviously, if things change and probabilities for a La Nina increase, then we will be taking a updated look at the winter forecast through a more of a La Nina lens. As of right now, I will take this winter forecast assuming a neutral will be happening. So just to show you why I assume a neutral will be happening at this point, here is a outlook of several different models run by the Climate Prediction Center, and you can see that they basically right here are forecasting, and you can see here's Celsius on the side up to 3 degrees and 2.5 degrees negative. And most models, again, that threshold is half a degrees above for an El Nino, half a degrees below for a La Nina. And most models are suggesting that we stay in between that range of 0.5 and 5. And 0.5. There are a few outliers that do show negative half a degrees, which would be a La Nina, but you can see that it is not the majority, as the vast majority are in the center. Now, this gets updated, I believe, every second Thursday of the month, maybe a little bit more frequently. So as this gets updated, I will be making updates, maybe not new winter forecasts every time, but Enso outlooks and winter, I guess, forecast thoughts. So stay tuned for those. Here's another set of models. This is the Climate Forecast System version 2 forecast model, and there are, again, a lot of spaghetti different models here. So you can see the most recent one was issued the 3rd of August. This one is a little bit more aggressive, and you can see that it has a dotted dashed line as an average of all of these models. Very, very few, actually not a single one, show an El Nino, so that is rather unlikely. But there are quite a few that do show a La Nina. In fact, enough where this dashed line essentially becomes dipping into the La Nina territory, negative 0.5 degrees. So this one is a little bit more of a La Nina base. Based on tracking this slideshow for more than, at this point, almost 10 years, usually this set of models is a little less accurate and it'll get a little too overexcited within each update. But we will keep an eye on this. If it continues in this trend, we will have to update our winter forecast. As of right now, we are assuming an Enso neutral. So you may be wondering, okay, all this talk about El Nino, La Nina, Enso neutral, what does this mean? Well, historically, you could see that the winters have been alternating between La Ninas, El Ninos. This goes back the last 12 years. And in order to get a better look at what we may be seeing this year, I looked back at years going back all the way to 1950, and the most recent example of this was 2013 into 2014. So 2012 into 2013 was a neutral. So you could see the 2013 winter was a neutral. 2013 winter. And then there was another neutral back to back from 2013 into 2014. And assuming we get a neutral this year, that would be the same case as in 2012, 2013, 2014, where we had a neutral into 2024, 2025, and then another one 2025 into 2026. Now, back-to-back neutral Ensos have only occurred a few times in history, going back all the way to 1950. And just before I show you what I found by compiling all those few examples of back-to-back neutrals, I want to show you what a normal neutral ENSO looks like. So this is an average, just not assuming any back-to-back, just every Enso neutral pattern put together, compiled on a map, looks something like this. We have a Pacific jet stream that streams straight into the northwest, bringing lots of precipitation for those areas. And we see a polar jet stream diving down from Canada and into the United States, pretty far south, bringing cold air, again, pretty far south. Now, obviously, along this polar jet stream, we see Alberta clippers, typically during the winter, so that would bring snow for the Midwest and wherever this jet stream lines up, which could go as far as the deep south. And then we have a subtropical jet that is usually a little weaker, but nonetheless very impactful, and wherever that lines up, especially in relation to the polar jet stream, could determine whether or not we get massive snowstorms across the eastern shores of the United States, or if this moisture and precipitation streaming from the Pacific and Gulf just kind of goes off to the shore if the subtropical jet stream is further south. So this is the typical ENSO neutral pattern. It favors cold and snow, especially given those warmer wet conditions to the south and cold conditions to the north across many of these locations. Now, I wanted to compile and show you what the data looked like. Anomalies, you can see this is a composite anomaly of surface air temperatures Celsius going back to those years that had the ENSO back-to-back winter. So as I gave you an example, 2012, 2013 was a year, and then 2013, 2014 was another year. So you could see in this case, I have 2014 winter as my analog. And that has happened a few times else in history. And basically, what we have found is that the cold temperature anomalies throughout the months of December and February of those winters was extremely cold. You could see it is also not only extremely cold, but across a massive area of the United States. And just to show you this a little bit further in detail, of those same years, the December of those months looked like this. So again, pretty widespread cold on average. January looked extremely cold, by far the worst month out of all the 3 months. And then February looked like this, still cold, a little warmer compared to January, but still pretty darn cold. So that was the temperature anomaly graph, and as you can see right now, I have the precipitation anomaly graph pulled up. And this is again compiling the whole winter of all those neutral back-to-back ENSO years. And you can see that the precipitation footprint looks quite wet across the eastern shores of the eastern United States, the southern shores of the southern United States, and the west, right where that Pacific jet stream slams into those mountains. You may be wondering, why is this dry here? And if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. Areas that are colder and typically see a lot of snow don't actually see above average precipitation during the year, because say your average precipitation is 2 inches across Chicago in the month of January. In order to get to that average precipitation in the form of snow, that would be 20 inches. And all you would have to get above average snow would be 15 inches. So again, usually snowy winters are actually drier in terms of precipitation, but snowier because snow isn't the same as rain. It melts down into a lot less water. So this actually makes sense and supports potentially cold and snow across a good portion of the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, and into southeastern Canada. And then again, here we have wetter conditions, and that's to do with the fact that the East Coast gets a lot of those nor'easters and a lot of those systems, which combine with that polar jet stream and subtropical jet stream that develop into these monster systems. So now I want to show you and start off with my snowfall forecast. So this isn't as much of a forecast as where I think it will be more likely to be above or below average. So let's start off with the orange/brown colors. In this darker brown color is where I have medium confidence that there will be less snowfall. Again, as that subtropical jet stream and those really, I think, warm temperatures that will be setting up across a good portion of the southwestern United States, it will be avoiding many of these areas and going to the south, bringing the precipitation with it. So the snowfall chances, I think, are pretty bad. In that oranger color, we have a higher confidence that there will be even higher confidence of less precipitation across these areas. Now, inversely, let's start off across the northwest. I think that there will be quite a bit of snowfall across the northwestern United States and southwestern Canada, including southwestern Canada. It doesn't just cut off at the border there. And the reason for that is, again, that Pacific jet stream associated with those neutral ENSO years. And there's a sharp cutoff into say the plains, because the mountains usually absorb a lot of this moisture, and I don't necessarily think massive systems will be setting up across these areas. I think that will be happening further east. Here, across the Midwest, I have a higher chance of seeing snowfall, and in the darker color, even higher chances, and that's to do with the fact of the polar jet stream running somewhere in and around this area. As you saw with that neutral ENSO graphic, I believe that will be bringing Alberta clippers and just various snow systems through those areas, combined with very cold air, which will also make the lake effect snowbelts see a lot of snow. Notice across the northeast, I have also blue and even like a purple color, and that is why that's why because I think there will be a lot of big systems big snowstorms and potentially even a few major nor'easters this year across a good portion of the Northeast, as that polar jet stream with that really cold air combines with that subtropical jet stream from the south, and it turns these into massive systems, as we saw in the analog years of 2013, 2014, 1993, 1994, 1981, 1982, and etc., etc. Almost all of those analog years had big snowstorms across the eastern United States. This is now my temperature outlook for the entire United States, and you can see that across the southwest I do believe it will be warmer, especially across those orange colors. Anywhere in the white, that is basically areas where I don't know, it could swing both ways depending. If the cold air is more prominent, it could definitely be more colder. If the warm air is more prominent, it could definitely be warmer. Now in the blues, the darker blues, and the purple, I think is where it will be the coldest. Now, you may be wondering, why isn't the Northeast in the blue? You said there's going to be a lot of snow. And yes, but typically if you want large systems, large snowstorms that are moisture laden, you typically don't overlap those conditions with extreme cold. Sure, there will be cold, enough for it to be snow, not rain, but I don't think it will be that much below average. I think a lot of those areas will actually, in fact, with some of the systems, especially earlier on or later in the season, these coastal areas might even see rain as these systems produce the heavier snow across the coast, the inland regions. I definitely think you guys will see snowstorms across the coastal areas, but it just won't be the whole winter. So that's why I think your temperature outlook will be pretty neutral there. But yes, I do believe that the coldest of the conditions will be occurring across the Great Lakes and into portions of the upper Midwest. Now this could obviously shift further west or east depending on the exact orientation and setup. And if we have a La Nina and not a neutral, that changes things, and I will be updating my forecast presumably. So take a look at the south. I made Florida all blue because I do believe that these Arctic blasts will dig really deep into the southern United States. Okay, so for the final graphic now is the official thumbnail of these YouTube weather forecasts, winter forecasts, and you can see that it is a little colorful. So first off, I want to start off by saying that the areas in the gray are pretty much areas that are undecided or basically can swing either way. So say across the southwest here, if it's warmer, they could be in orange. If it's colder here, they could definitely be colder and snowier. Same thing here across Ohio, West Virginia, these random areas. This is also that they could be more swinging towards a brutal cold versus maybe more impacted by the heavy snows that I foresee. But either way, honestly, if you live especially in these areas right here, I would just say take a combination of all three of these, and that's most likely what you will get. But the areas that are under a color, I do have the highest confidence for them seeing what is listed on top of their colors. So the Northwest, I think, will be snowy. Cold, yes, but also very snowy as a Pacific jet stream slams right into your guys' area. The Southwest, I think you'll be high and dry. Now again, this could definitely be a little bit more expansive, and I think in reality it probably will be. Unfortunately for the Southwest, I don't think this will be a great year for drought relief for you. Now if we go to the northern United States, you can see that I have these low pressures that's marked by those Alberta clippers that I believe will be streaming in from the northern Canadian areas and dropping quite a bit of heavy snow, but more in moderate amounts, but just many of them, which still will end up producing heavy snows, and that's marked in that fierce purple color. Brutal cold on the south side of these Alberta clippers, and obviously where the heavy snow occurs, there also will be brutal cold. But these areas won't see as much snow, so I decided that brutal cold will be a better way to describe them. So you can see the brutal cold extends across many of these areas. Here's the battle zone. I believe that many of these areas will be in a winter battle zone, so kind of divided between the warmth and the cold from the north and south. Here, I do believe across Florida and the deep south it will be wet, as a lot of these systems, originate and begin forming into large nor'easters. They will be dropping a lot of severe weather and precipitation. Now, depending on, if we see a really colder neutral ENSO setup, and we see a winter that tends and leans towards that direction, which based on the analogs it seems the case, a lot of this wet might actually, the northern half especially, turn into snow. So that could be something interesting. And then of course we have blizzards, and I do believe these will be large. It won't be just like the coastal areas. I think these things could turn into monsters, and here I have kind of drawn out low pressure systems that I believe the track they will be taking, and that will be roughly where the low pressure has to be in order to produce a lot of these snows here, with that brutal cold coming from the north, moisture-laden areas from the south. I believe some of these areas are in for a lot of precipitation. Now, again, a lot of these areas in the gray will be caught somewhere in between. So that's basically it for today's video. I will be making more updates on the winter forecast, but that is it. That is for the preliminary one, and hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you found it exciting, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. See y'all. Bye.